background is elite sport. I did an archery beginner's course for my 15th birthday. Seemed like a good idea at the time, and 3 years later I was representing my country. Just getting the Great Britain t-shirt wasn't enough for me, and I wanted to know exactly what it took to be the best in the world. I spent years analysing each and every performance to see where I could get those few extra points. I watched how others annihilated their opposition in nail-biting matches and always strove to discover what separates the best in the world from everybody else. And eventually I figured it out. Success is psychological. Our brain, our mindset determines whether we're going to be successful or failure. Even in sport, which is predominantly seen as a display of physical prowess. Athletes are pitted against one another to determine who's the fastest, strongest, or most skillful. But the real battles are fought in the mind. I didn't manage to remain world number one for my entire career or win medals with the able-bodied team because I worked harder or had a better technique than everybody else. It was because I was mentally stronger when it really mattered. Strength of character has an enormous role to play in everybody's journey to success, regardless of the field. Talent, genetics, and natural intellect are hugely overrated. It's a person's mental toughness that will see each and every one of us reach ambitious goals, regardless, even when we face great adversity. This is fantastic news because this is something we can work on. We can develop grit and resolve. So how do we do it? A large part of it comes down to confidence. You've got to trust yourself to know that you're doing the right thing, you're making the right decisions, and that you are capable of achieving. You have to believe in yourself and your ability no matter what. In my sport, I had to know that I could beat my competitors, otherwise I'd have lost before I even started to play. Elite sports people expect to succeed instead of trying not to fail, which is a really important distinction. However, confidence, or rather the lack of it, is a massive problem for many people, and it prevents them from achieving what they're truly capable of. Confidence building is a phrase that's often thrown around nowadays, and every training company and his dog seems to be offering confidence building to employees, managers, leaders, students, and sports people. It is undoubtedly important, but I think we're running before we know how to walk. We need to build solid foundations before we can start constructing the walls. And the foundation for success is self-awareness. Now I want to ask you a question. How well do you know yourself? The answer is going to vary, of course, but I'm willing to bet that it's not well enough. With relationships, friendships, and even business meetings, we spend a lot of time getting to know the other person, but we rarely spend that same time and effort on ourselves. For most of us, we know ourselves at a very basic level only. We know our likes and dislikes. I hate mushrooms and rap music, for example, but I love chocolate and travelling. Others know their body quite well, and I actually think having a disability or being involved in sport really helps here. You know how far you can push your body before you've got to stop. You know how your body reacts to certain stimuli, and what you need to do to get the most out of it. What we don't know a lot about, though, is our mind. We don't focus on our thought process, our emotional state, and our behaviour. Do you know what motivates you, what drives you? Do you understand the effect that your thought process has on your behaviour? Do you know how you react in stressful, high-pressure situations? Do you know why you succeed and why you fail? We don't tend to think about the way we think. Contrary to popular belief, talking to yourself is not the first sign of madness. We all engage in an internal dialogue with ourselves. We maintain whole conversations with ourselves, vocalizing our thoughts, which influences the way we behave. Our internal voice chatters away, and it tells us what we believe, and we take that as fact. We believe it, and this then influences our behavior. We are what we think. Now, let's look at an example. Somebody with a big presentation coming up might think, I absolutely hate standing in front of a room full of people. I always get really, really nervous and then forget what I'm supposed to say. This person is not going to be feeling particularly confident about their ability. They're fully expecting to get nervous, and then that adrenaline rush hits. Now, of course, this is going to influence their behavior. And what might happen in this situation is our presenter might make a mistake. He gets distracted, and he really puts him off track. He sort of throws him off, and he gets all flustered. He doesn't know what to do, and he thinks he's blown it. And what that does is that reaffirms that original thought that nerves always manage to put him off. Dread builds as his next presentation approaches, and he remembers how badly he did last time. The thought changes our feelings, which then changes the behaviour. Of course, this works the other way too. So a positive thought creates a positive emotion, which is much more likely to lead to a positive behaviour and therefore a positive result. Now, I want you to imagine that you own a field. In spring, you plant rows of beans, and in autumn, you harvest a plentiful crop of beans. The following year, you decide you want cabbages. So when the weather warms up, you go plant your seeds, which grow into nice, neat rows of cabbages. You reap what you sow. If you were to scatter a handful of nettle seeds, you're going to come back to find a field full of nettles. No self-respecting farmer is going to plant a field full of weeds. It's not the most productive use of his time, and it certainly won't pay the bills. So why would you plant negative seeds in your mind? Negative beliefs and thoughts are a bit like planting weeds. They grow and spread into unhelpful behaviour. Unfortunately, our brain comes pre-programmed to seek out things that could potentially hurt us. We don't sit there worrying about what happens if we ace that presentation, because that's not a threat to our physical or emotional well-being. Instead, we're always on high alert for danger. And in a stressful situation, with the risk of failure looming, we are much more likely to think negatively. Our inner voice tells us things like, you can't do it, you're useless, you can never deliver when it matters, other people are so much better than you. Quite often, we're self-delusional rather than self-aware, and we don't challenge this inner critical voice. Instead, we genuinely believe what it tells us. We believe we're not good enough, even when we've got evidence to prove otherwise. So, how can we ever hope to build up self-confidence levels if negative chatter's bringing you down? The thing is, we have the power to either be the master of our own destiny or the maker of our own demise. Our thought process rules how successful we're going to be. Of course, we first need to understand our thought process. You need to understand what makes you tick. What sends you spiraling into a downward circle of despair? And most importantly, what makes you think positively about yourself? What makes you believe in yourself? It's a straightforward concept. If you don't know what you're thinking, then it's impossible to change the way you think. It's going to be really, really difficult, therefore, to build up your confidence and develop the mental toughness that will see you succeed. Self-awareness allows us to adjust our behaviour to something more productive. It's the first stage on your journey to success. So how do we do it? It's quite simple. We start paying more attention to what we say to ourselves. How often do you belittle yourself, tell yourself you're useless and can't do it? And how many times in a day do you praise yourself and feel good about your achievements? By taking stock of the way we think, you're able to unearth patterns in your thought process, which makes it much more easy to recognise those negative thoughts. As an athlete, I noticed that the more aware I became, the easier it was to reprogram my thinking and the more confident and successful I got. Negative thoughts don't go away, but what we can do is once we recognise them, we can turn them into something more productive. And we can start building on the positive thoughts that are there until we unequivocally believe we are equal to the task. You change how you feel about yourself, you change your behaviour. So instead of worrying about that presentation and how nerves always put you off and how rubbish you are, change it. Focus on the preparation you've put in and the compliments you've received in the past. Focus on what you need to do in order to do a good job. And it is hard work. It's like wading against a tide. But with lots of practice, keep repeating it, it becomes easier until it's almost automatic. Now, the other area where self-awareness is really, really important and really, really useful is to help us understand our strengths and weaknesses better. Now, I've noticed a lot of people are very, very good at writing long lists of their failings, but aren't quite as forthcoming when it comes to strengths and achievements. In fact, a number of people I've actually worked with have managed to turn really positive accomplishments into a negative. So I've been told, yeah, I've got a degree, but it's not worth the paper it's written on. Or, I've represented my county, but everyone does that, so it's not a big deal. Some people will willingly give their right arm for achievements like these, but those that have actually accomplished it don't see it as an achievement at all. Self-awareness helps us realise what we have got rather than what we haven't. It changes our perception of ourselves because it forces us to realise that good things do happen to us. And that's really, really important. Now, to be successful, you've got to constantly keep evolving. Of course, it's important to understand the areas where you fall short, because if you don't know that, how are you ever going to improve on them? But it's even more important to realise, accept, and appreciate your strengths. It is a person's strengths that sees him or her succeed, not the absence of weaknesses. Once we know what our strengths are, we can then come up with a plan to develop them further. We can reach our overall objectives through that. Self-awareness is the foundation for success. It's about taking a long, hard look at yourself without judgment so we can start to make changes that will have a positive impact. That inner voice has been ignored for far too long. It's time to start listening. Thank you.